This is convening the Senate hearing on Senate Bill 101, prohibiting the state from requiring implementation of Common Core standards. And we'll hear from the bill's sponsor, Senator Avard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have an amendment to this that's being duplicated now. It adds to the bill, and Senator Avard will explain that. And we have a broken copier on this board. We're seeking copies of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 101, I'm sponsor of this bill, basically prohibiting the state from requiring the implementation of Common Core standards. I've heard from a number of my constituents from across District 12 and frankly from across the state where people are very opposed to the idea of the Common Core being a standard that they are required to. They want the choice, and this bill addresses that, making parents, giving them the right to opt out of the Common Core standard. That's basically what this bill has to address. I do have Doris O'Henderson to talk a little bit about the amended language that will be in the bill itself.
Chairman Reagan, members of the committee, I'm Doris Hohensee. I live in Nashua with Senator Avard. I'm here in support of the bill, which is actually very moderate legislation, and I'll explain why. The first section of the bill prohibits the state from requiring the implementation of Common Core state standards. This changes nothing in statute. It only clarifies the law. And why is this necessary? Because there's been, and continues to be, substantial amount of misinformation being fed to, even intimidation of district school boards with regard to the adoption of Common Core. I spoke to the Alton School Board back in 2013 about the Common Core standards. In that discussion, which included the Department of Education Director Heather Gage, it was disclosed that districts are not obliged to adopt the Common Core standards. Moreover, she assured the Alton Board that no state funding would be lost if the district elects not to adopt these standards. A month or so later, the same discussion came up before the Manchester School Committee. Superintendent Livingston warned her school board that state funds, and she quantified it, would be in jeopardy if Common Core was not adopted. It was only after the videotape from the Alton School Board meeting was brought to the attention of the Manchester Board that this issue was clarified. Mayor Gatsis was quite angry and immediately called the commissioner to express his displeasure with the lack of transparency over the adoption of these standards. Has this confusion stopped? No. Many superintendents in other districts are still pushing school board members and suggesting that state funds are at risk if Common Core is not adopted. This bill resolves that confusion and makes it clear, once and for all, that there's no funds that will be lost if a district elects not to adopt Common Core, like Wakefield and some other districts. The second section of this bill defines competencies as student learning targets that represent academic concepts, skills, and knowledge within a single content domain. Just give you this, you can all have a copy of the testimony. Such as English, language arts, reading, math, science, social studies, the general subjects that you've seen. What does this do? It restores the traditional educational practice. The department recently took it upon itself to implement competency-based education without statutory authority based on its controversial definition of these competencies, which does not focus on academic concepts, skills, and knowledge, and may span multiple subject areas. Their definition says competency means student learning targets that represent key content-specific concepts, skills, and knowledge applied within or across content domains. Why is this necessary? Because the general court has rejected competency-based education. This body has rejected this concept. This bill simply restores the status quo until the legislature authorizes any change. By way of history, Senator Stiles introduced legislation in 2011 and 2013 seeking to establish a commission to develop strategies towards the implementation of competency-based education. Both of these bills failed in the House, and I've listed which bills they are. Senate Bill 192, establishing a committee to identify strategies needed for developing a 21st century education, and Senate Bill 82, establishing a commission to identify strategies needed for developing and implementing a competency-based public education system. They were defeated. Next, she went to the State Board of Education, instructing them to implement competency-based education anyway. I just happened to be there, bypassing the will of her colleagues and this legislature. The change towards competency-based education is substantive. Let me explain. It's unconstitutionally downshifts significant costs onto our districts, but most importantly, it proposes to transform our schools in opposition to the will of our elected representatives. If this change is to be made, let it be reintroduced into this body and successfully passed before it is implemented without thought or concern for the cost or effect on our school and our children. Until then, let our schools focus on academic concepts, knowledge, and skills. Students should not have to worry about multiple subjects at once, especially in the primary grades. It is demoralizing for a youngster to be marked down when trying to describe why 2 + 2 is 4, because his language skills can't adequately deal with a concept which is cognitively beyond his developmental ability. Let students master one subject at a time, receive positive reinforcement for that important mastery. This bill does not prohibit districts from creating multidisciplinary projects for their students. It's been done for decades before competency-based education. Nothing is forced upon the districts in today's bill. It simply resets the norm for districts that choose not to adopt Common Core and don't want Common Core surreptitiously implemented in their schools. ED 306 is the rule that the department had passed for the approval to be a public school. It is the approval process. So you can drop Common Core, but you have to do it anyway? Why should we say on the one hand that Common Core standards are voluntary, while on the other hand force districts through competency-based education to implement Common Core without the legislature revisiting and approving this issue? And I ask for your support.
What's that?
Any questions?
Any questions, Senator Harvey?
Yes, sir.
Senator Harvey, you said that no funds will be lost. Are you directing this to state funds or to federal funds? Are you trying to control federal funds as well?
I believe federal funds.
For Senator Agrard, I just wanted to clarify that the bill that I have before me has now been amended, and that's,
Well, the amendment part, it actually defines, it defines the definitions of this particular bill.
It defines
no,
competencies.
excuse me, I just had a question for Senator. So what you're proposing today is the amendment, which has now become the bill.
It is part of the bill, correct.
Thank you.
Seen to it in the executive session. Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a question for you, Senator. Thank you. The question of the competency-based education, as you may know, I've been working a lot with career and technical education and work-ready and career-based education in our schools. How would the proposed change in that definition of competency potentially impact what we need to do in our career and technical education centers in this regard?
Well, the whole idea behind the bill is to give the local, it's to ensure local control of basically their standards. Can you address that a little bit more clearly?
There's nothing in this bill that would prohibit a district from continuing with competencies if they felt it was in the best interest of their students. We're now seeing in Nashua where there's a conflict between what the department says and what they feel is in the best interest of their students. This would reset the clock, allow them to do either, not mandate it.
If I may, the bill is basically designed to ensure local control. People from across my district are crying for this to be completely repealed, and they don't want it. And this allows I'm giving them a voice. They basically want local control, and that's the whole design behind this bill.
Thank you.
If I may, I just want to ask that perhaps you clarify further, perhaps after the hearing, about my concern that it seems to me that this in fact does not allow the kind of choice that you describe in terms of letting competencies be not specifically based on one academic discipline when it comes to issues like career and technical education.
That, I totally understand where you're coming from, Senator. I'd be happy to talk to you about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we'll hear from the State Board of Education Chair, Tom Raffio, who's opposed to the bill.
Thank you, Senator Reagan and members of the committee. I'm Tom Raffio, CEO of Northeast Delta Dental. First and foremost, I'm a conservative business person and also a conservative citizen of the state of New Hampshire. I happen to be chair of the State Board of Education, so I'm well versed on this topic. I'm also the chair of the Business and Education Coalition, which is a collaborative group of business leaders, policymakers, educators, and leading politicians as well, such as Senator Molly Kelly and Senator Stiles and others. I'm here today to testify in significant opposition to Senate Bill 101, both in terms of its original form as well as the amendment that I just heard. I do have copies of my written testimony, but I'm going to have to deviate a little bit because that's the first I heard of the amendment. I have the support of the total State Board of Education. I also have the support of the Business and Education Coalition, and I have the support of the Board of Directors of Delta Dental Clinic of New Hampshire. As you know, the BIA and many business leaders across the state are in favor of the Common Core. We need to be competitive in the United States, and the original reason why, one of the main reasons why I was against this bill originally was because, despite what was just said by Doris, there is no miscommunication, misinformation out there. We've made it very clear from the very beginning that the districts can opt out of the Common Core. There absolutely has been no intimidation. I think it's a totally false statement. So I really, and then I will comment right now on the amended part of it. Because of my job, I get to travel all across the United States of America. New Hampshire is viewed as leading edge, very progressive in terms of education. And one of the reasons is because of all the innovative things that we've done in terms of competency-based 21st century learning. So if we want the citizens of New Hampshire to remain competitive in the United States, we don't want to backtrack. I will work 100 hours a week to testify against any bill like this or any other ones that are appearing next week as well. All business leaders understand we need trained students that are ready for the workforce, that are ready to get to college if that's their choice, or ready for the workforce. So it's frustrating for me to go around the country and New Hampshire gets recognized for all of the things that we're doing, and then I come back home and I have to testify to make sure that we don't backtrack. But specifically on Senate Bill 101, and this is what the written testimony will say, when we endorsed, when the State Board of Education endorsed the Common Core standards, we were, as I already mentioned, we were essentially recommending them to the local school districts. We knew that they were effective, and we worked, the department and many staff members worked for years on it. Hundreds of teachers across the state helped write them. But the adoption was up to the school district. That's a critical point. It's not true that local school superintendents are intimidated that they have to adopt them. Since then, virtually all of our school districts have begun teaching the new standards or their own standards. So if the city of Manchester wanted to do it their own way, they could. As you probably know, they ended up adopting pretty much the Common Core, but they had the choice to adopt more aggressive standards. I'm out there a lot. Teachers report to me and other members of the State Board of Education that the standards have been very successful in the classrooms. I'll quote, "We raised the bar for our students and they are meeting the new challenge." Talk to teachers. They're your best source for information. They've endorsed it. They're teaching to it. Recently, the union leader did an in-depth four-part report on how the rollout of the Common Core was going in New Hampshire, and quoted a little girl in one of our school districts who said, in a positive way, jumping up in the air, "Our brains are on fire." That was in a positive way. Education standards are nothing new. States have been working together for the last decade to improve education standards that set goals for our students in each subject by the end of each grade. We've had older versions since 2000. If you move to Iowa, you want to know that your child is ready for Iowa's 10th grade. If someone from Iowa moves here, you want to make sure that they're ready for New Hampshire's 10th grade. The Common Core state standards for math and English language arts are now used by 43 states, and they were the next step in that process. They drew upon the best standards from across the United States, responding to teacher concerns about having to rush through too many topics at a surface level. New Hampshire teachers take justifiable pride in seeing New Hampshire ideas in the final version of the standards. We had a lot of input in the Common Core standards. These are standards that set high expectations for our students in New Hampshire and become increasingly rigorous from grade to grade. In math, students must master material in depth before they move on, rather than repeating the same concepts year after year. In English, students need to master nonfiction as well as literature. We know the higher standards won't fix everything, we're not saying that, but they are a step in the right direction. That's why New Hampshire started using the Common Core standard as an enhancement to its college and ready standards for English language, art, and math subjects way back in 2010. But that was just the beginning. These standards set the minimum goals that our students have a common roadmap of expected knowledge and skills as their peers in other states. So as I said, if you move to another state, you want to know that our students are ready. But as a reminder, each district continues to control its own curriculum. This potential law is not necessary. Lesson plans and instructional materials, and in New Hampshire, they also already control whether or not to even use the Common Core at all. Districts have been using these higher standards for that. Most of our districts have been using the higher standards for about 4 years. The State Board of Education recognizes, as does the BIA and many other businesses do, that helping students reach higher standards will make a major contribution to the New Hampshire economy as our schools begin to graduate more students prepared for college and the workforce. I can't tell you the number of meetings I go to with business leaders who lament that graduating students aren't qualified and they are totally behind raising the bar with the Common Core to address this problem. But the immediate benefit to our children might even be more important. Higher New Hampshire standards give our students a better opportunity to compete with confidence in the careers they choose and give parents peace of mind that we're doing the best for our children. So again, all across the country, we're viewed as a benchmark in terms of how to do education right. This coming Saturday, I'm on a panel, and just about every example used, and this happens to be at Harvard University, uses New Hampshire as an example of how to do 21st century learning correctly. We don't want to go backwards. So while this bill makes a statement, it does not make a policy that benefits New Hampshire children. So therefore, I urge you to vote it inexpedient to legislate. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions either as a business leader, coalition chair, or the chair of the State Board of Education.
So, Mr. Raffio, you just made the statement that New Hampshire is the standard, so why are we going to somebody else's standard if we're the standard?
We're the standard because we contributed to, many New Hampshire people contributed to the Common Core. And when I say the standard, I was using that generically in terms of all of the innovative 21st century learning, extended learning opportunities, blizzard bags where students on a winter day when school is canceled can still do their work. I'm talking about the whole holistic view of all of the exciting things, the new minimum standards that we just went through a year-long process of adopting, permits all of the 21st century learning. Common Core is just one part of it.
Mr. Chair, thank you. You had said that we're going back, but when parents are saying they don't want it, are you saying that they don't have a right to choose and make their voices heard here?
No, I'm not saying that at all, Senator. What I'm saying is if that's the voice of your local school district, the local school district can adopt other standards. So you don't need this stuff. So they've always, believe me, I understand local control. I chair the State Board of Education. Frequently, there are towns that are dividing. Everybody wants their own little school district. I get all of that. I'm well versed in that and totally understand the decentralized nature and local school control. That local school can listen to their parents, and if they, like Manchester, want to adopt something differently, they can do that.
Without being argumentative.
Oh, I don't think
I don't think
A while back, I believe, Senator Kelly, you were actually the chair of the Committee of Advanced Manufacturers of Education. Did I get that right?
Advanced Manufacturing and Education Advisory.
Are you familiar with that particular committee?
well, the organization.
Well, yes, Senator Kelly was actually the chair of the committee here, and one of the things I drew from that particular committee, because I happened to sit on it, for a little period of time, is that the manufacturers were going there, and they were not the engineers were coming our way and almost pounding the table, saying, if I could just get a kid that can do simple arithmetic, decimals, I could hire them right out of high school, and we'll pay their way to college, so that they can learn the advanced if they decide to go there. But not every child goes to college. Doesn't this bill allow local control? Doesn't it allow the students and parents through their board of their school board? Doesn't it allow them to have a choice in this? Doesn't it? In other words, if we do one cookie cutter thing for the entire state, doesn't that just do a disservice towards other kids that aren't going to be going to college and don't need that advanced?
No. The Common Core is not prescriptive. It allows that very thing. This is what I'm trying to get across. The Common Core, kind of like Baldrige quality of business, is not prescriptive. It would definitely allow that student to get that basic math and go on if that's what they wanted to do. We've had many presentations at the Business and Education Coalition where manufacturing heads have made some similar points, and they're totally in support of the Common Core because it's not prescriptive. You don't need this law to do what you want, the option that you want.
If I just want to.
Sure. Mike.
Thank you. Only because you mentioned the Advanced Manufacturing Education Advisory Council, I would just like to say that the council endorsed the Common Core and did come before the state school board to encourage our standards in mathematics, and I just want you to confirm that on that sense, because businesses were crying out for the standards in math and the understanding conceptually of math, as well as the ability to really perform in mathematics, and they were crying out for it.
That's correct, Senator Kelly, and again, the BIA, which it has its roots in manufacturing, supports the Common Core. They would definitely not get their membership to support. It's hard to get all businesses to support anything, and for the BIA to support the Common Core for that very reason, it should really resonate with you all. I think dealing with Senator your point.
Senator Stiles.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for coming in. I just want to be clear, it's my understanding that the underlying concept of the core itself is to teach critical thinking skills, which is what business and industry and life skills are looking for.
Critical thinking, exactly. That's what we look for, because the world is moving so fast. What you learn, whether it's in high school or college today, 2 years is probably out of date. What we look for when we're trying to hire people is critical skills, thinking, being able to work in groups, and the Common Core definitely supports the critical thinking process, absolutely. And again, it's not prescriptive. Each teacher can own it and teach it as he or she feels it's best, for their students, and it definitely will address the basic math issues that you raised. Thank you for my time. I have the written testimony, but it focuses more on the original bill, not the amendments. I just want to make that clear. Anything? Senator? No,
thank you.
Thank you for accommodating.
Okay, let's switch back to our protocol here from Representative Abramson.
Thank you, Senator. I'm Representative Max Abramson from Hampton Falls and Seabrook. Good to see you. When I first ran, I'm asking you to support this bill. When I first ran for state representative this year, I asked, going door to door, how many people supported Common Core, and the bottom had dropped out. The amount of public support has gone, had gone at that point almost to zero. So I drafted the citizens petition, and with a number of other people have gone around getting signatures for the Winnicott ballot. So the issue is going to be on the ballot, March ballot for the Winnicott School District, asking people whether or not they supported Common Core. The reason for doing that was that such a large curriculum change I felt needed to be put in front of the voters. The voters had not been asked, it had not been put forward as a warrant article, and it was just, many of us felt it was just kind of mentioned right at the very end of last year's deliberative session, and quite a number of people felt like the public needed to have a say in it. So going around getting signatures from people, as opposed to the little bit of support that I heard several months ago, June, July, August, going door to door, there was absolutely no support, quite the opposite. There's now, parents are seeing it being implemented. Mothers and fathers now seem to be united, and even people who have no children in the school district are finding out about it through extended family, and they're seeing the kind of homework that their kids are coming home with. And the amount of opposition is growing to it, and I would ask the committee to support this measure because it has always been part of how our public schools have operated since we switched to from private schooling to public schooling before World War II. We've just always had local control. I do have another meeting to run to, so I can't take questions, but what I've heard overwhelmingly from my constituents is they're 100% opposed to this. If they know anything about it, if they've seen the kids come home homework under the new Common Core standards, they're opposed to it. And it seems to be almost unanimous now. So we'll wait for the results in March, but it doesn't sound like there's a lot of support left.
Okay, thank you. Now we will switch to someone who is opposed. We'll hear from the superintendent of schools in Pittsfield, John Freeman.
Thank you, sir.
So for everybody who's going to testify, we're going to do it like Representative Abramson did. Just give us your qualifications for why you're testifying and what your experience is and what your message is, why you support or oppose. And if you have written testimony, just present it to the clerk and the committee will get that, and that'll be distributed and that will be read. And we have a lot of people want to speak, so we're going to keep our testimony brief and to the point. Dr. Franklin.
I heard that brief and to the point, Senator. And thank you for your strong support of the Pittsfield schools and your commitment to our work. Much appreciated. When I first took a look at this proposed piece of legislation, I was a little puzzled and then became completely mystified because I see it as completely unnecessary. It's the way we do business right now. In Pittsfield, we began a curriculum review cycle several years ago. And as part of that review cycle, at the beginning of that cycle, our curriculum person, who was a part-time person at that time, came to the school board and presented to the school board on the Common Core state standards. And he, at that time, supported the adoption of the Common Core state standards, and he gave his rationale why. And other folks provided an argument as to why the Common Core state standards perhaps was not right for Pittsfield. Our school board at the time then decided not to adopt the Common Core state standards. What I heard from the school board at that time was that we do not want to adopt a set curriculum or a set of standards from an outside source. We want our teachers to develop the curriculum for our children. They felt at the time, and I'm paraphrasing now, they felt at the time that the teachers knew the students best, they had experience and background in their subject matter, and they want the teachers to make their decisions around curriculum revision and curriculum updating, that sort of thing. We received absolutely no pressure or no direction from the State Board of Education nor the Department of Education in New Hampshire that would lead us to sort of shake in our boots and say, well, we better adopt this thing. We had nothing from the state on that. And so we went through a multi-year process. Our teachers did indeed use the Common Core standard. They also used their knowledge of their curriculum, the knowledge of their subject areas, particularly the secondary school teachers. Our teachers used the previous standards, the New Hampshire state standards, which were several years dated, and then did a lot of independent research as they developed their curriculum. So if you looked at our curriculum today, you would find elements that you would recognize from the Common Core if you were versed in the Common Core state standards. But you'd also find other elements in there that you would not find in the Common Core. And our teachers did exactly what we were asked to do, what we were directed to do by our school board. Went ahead and developed a curriculum that was right for Pittsfield, in their minds right for Pittsfield kids, with no interference from external forces, no interference or direction from the state, either from the State Board of Education or from the Department of Education. We have found the opposite to be true in my experience in Pittsfield, and this is my 7th year as a superintendent in Pittsfield. We found that the officials of the Department of Education are not inclined to place demands upon us. We find that they're very, very giving of their time and very helpful to us if we seek assistance. They're very generous with their time, phone calls, emails, and even office visits on short notice. We've had the opposite experience, I think, from what is being described to some extent here. And I don't know that any other superintendents have had different experiences. I don't get out of Pittsfield all that much, but when I do, I don't hear complaints from other superintendents about the heavy hand of the Department of Education, quite frankly, particularly where in regards to curriculum matters. So anyway, to summarize my position, I would say that I see this as completely unnecessary as a way we're doing business now, and believe me, as a way that I appreciate doing business in Pittsfield. So thank you for your attention. I'd be happy to respond to questions about our work in Pittsfield.
Questions for Dr. Freeman?
One question.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Freeman, if the parents don't want it, do they have the choice?
Parents, there is a rule about a rule in the school board policy about opting out of particular elements of the curriculum, And so that is a part of what our parents have an option to do. I don't know of any examples of that having occurred, quite frankly, but that option is there. We also, I will add that we also in Pittsfield work to include our community in the critical decisions that we make. Our long-term plans, we just put out the notice that people should commit. Senator Reagan has been involved in a number of initiatives. We've done role analysis. We've looked at individual roles within the district, and we've redefined the roles for the contemporary world. Senator Reagan has also been a part of process mapping in Pittsfield, and so we want to create a system that's efficient and that's lean. And our community, of course, is invited into all of those opportunities, and has contributed quite a deal.
So one final question, if I may. Is there any explanation why, when I or other reps have gone door to door, knocking doors, why people are so against this?
I know there's a lot of misinformation out there about it. I go into the internet and see, try to keep up with what's written about controversial issues such as the Common Core state standards. And I see, I recognize a clear misinformation out there, and I don't know why people would be interested in doing that, but it happens. So I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about the Common Core state standards.
Thank you, Dr.
Great. Welcome, thank you.
Joseph Mundela for the in favor.
Thank you, Senators, for having this hearing today. I'm Joseph Mendola. I am a Senior Vice President at NAI Norwood Group, a commercial investment brokerage company in Bedford, New Hampshire, and concerned parent and grandparent in terms of education. And about a year ago, I just got sick and tired of hearing week after week businesses saying, we have these jobs and we don't have qualified students to fill them right here in our own state. So basically my wife said, if you're arguing with something, just go do something about it. So a group of us at the Manchester Chamber of Commerce formed a committee called the Education Committee. And the only way I know to get things done as a business person is to communicate. And local control of the students in the Manchester School District working with local businesses is how things got done. So we formed a committee, and I said, let's get every discipline that we can, advanced manufacturing, the arts, health, construction. We got all those business people. Once a month, we meet with each business leader with 15 teachers and guidance counselors from the Manchester School District, elementary, middle, and high. And we get together, and this is the second year we're doing this in a room, and it just floored me as to what the problem really is. And the problem really is we don't need Common Core state standards. If you want to go do that, go test it in another state and prove the theory before you make it a national program. What we need is to invite parents back into the process to be able to work in conjunction with the great teachers that we have in the state to get our students ready for those jobs. So when we're talking about advanced manufacturing, and Senator Avard is right. They're basically said, we just want these students to be conversant in that. What we need them to be is to be diligent with their soft skills. Saying hello, shaking someone's hand, looking somebody in the eye, being able to talk clearly. And that's where the role of the parents and the teachers, we don't need Common Core state standard to set the standard for us. What we need to do is to listen to these business leaders. And it was an eye-opener for me, it's an eye-opener for the teachers. So what are we doing? Go back into the schools, and we have a whole new communication process with the students. And so that is really what it's all about. And so we're doing something on a local level to really impact it, because if we are not producing good students for our businesses in the state of New Hampshire, we're just missing the whole target. So I asked the question, it seems that we need this law. I says, I'm involved with the Manchester school system. Why has Mayor Gatz had to use all of his political will to get the money released from the state DOE? If it's, if you want to opt out, you can opt out. But, you know, why did he have to go through all that grief? And then we hear from our good friends in Washington, and I've talked to the entire delegation, we have got to revise No Child Left Behind. It's other than open classroom, some of us may remember that failed theory, has been one of the worst things we can inflict on public education. But we can't, from the US DOE, we get this gun to our head that we can't get out of the waiver unless we take Common Core state standards. That's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. So what we're doing is we're just trying to get back at the local level. We hear businesses, and we're working with teachers to make this happen so everyone would have that choice. So if you have parents in your district that want to go a different way, we have a better way. And the last thing I want to say is what's coming down the pike next is next-gen science standards, okay? Now, if you go to the website, you hear Fred Johnson, who's a former national science teacher. He has said what we're fighting against. He said, what we're doing with these standards is we're trying to create human capital. Well, my friends, Horace Mann in 1845, when he put down the 6 points of what a public education is all about, public education is not about human capital. It's about producing human beings who are responsible members of a free society. And Common Core state standards misses that mark.
Thank you. So my understanding is that Manchester is allowed to do this now.
That's what I read in the paper, that they were finally got the funds released to do that.
So I would just follow up with Senator Stiles, and thank you for your testimony, but if in fact Manchester can do what they want on local control, then why do we need this bill?
Why did he have to use his political capital to do it if it's a matter of course? It's someone's not understanding the program, and I think what this bill is basically saying is let's make it clear. That's all it's saying. Let's make it clear. So there's no misunderstanding.
I just want to follow up on that, is that I just want to clarify that I work with business leaders and educators on advanced manufacturing every day, and that they have endorsed the Common Core, many of them. But I think the issue that is before us today is whether districts have the ability to opt out or not.
Absolutely.
They do. They do. And I think all the testimony today and the law is very clear that they do.
It's just that it hasn't been. And just ask Mary Hanses.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
And now in opposition to the bill, Ellen Hume Howard from Sanborn Regional Schools, I guess.
Hi. My name is Ellen Hume Howard. I'm the curriculum director for the Sanborn Regional School District in Kingston, New Hampshire. And I'm here to speak in opposition to this bill, Senate Bill 101, simply because I think we're already past this point. In our school district, we've been using the Common Core for 5 years, and I thought maybe it would be good to weigh in here and talk about what really has transformed in our district since we've been using the Common Core. The Common Core is a set of standards of what students need to know, understand, and do. It's not a curriculum. The curriculum in our district is completely designed by our teachers, and the expectations are set by the Common Core. For instance, students in grade 2 should know how to write complete sentences. Any grade 2 teacher can find their way to that standard. One of the things that concerns me about this legislation is that it creates an issue that I don't think exists. We work hard to communicate with our parents about each step of our journey as a district to raise our standards. And when the Common Core came along, it provided us exactly what we needed, which was high standards, but the autonomy as a district to guide our curriculum for what our students needed. One of the things that's held us back in other curriculum initiatives is sometimes they're very prescriptive, or textbooks that tell us exactly what every student needs to do. We're not interested in that in our district. And as I speak for other curriculum directors in the state, I'm chair of the curriculum directors in the Southeast. I can tell you that having the ability to move students forward by their ability to show competencies and to have freedom in our curriculum at our district level is incredibly important for moving our students forward and preparing them for the 21st century. going back to archaic prescriptive curriculum will hold our kids back. And I appreciate the fact that people want to have choice, and I'm a New Hampshire stater, so I agree with that. But I just wanted to weigh in and tell you that all the scary things that people say happen with the Common Core have not happened in our district, our experience. I have 210 teachers that I work with, 1,800 students. Our transition to the Common Core has been smooth, has been effective. Our parents, of course, question lots of things, but we've had great positive dialogue with them to explain to them what our expectations are for students and how they, in partnership with us, can help guide their students' achievement. But we've been very clear that we are shooting for high standards in our district. And I appreciate the fact that the state is offering that to all districts so they know what those standards are, so our students can be competitive across states.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. Just a question about competencies, which you referenced. So your curriculum development and your teachers have had no difficulties using the definition of competencies that are now offered by the Department of Education?
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming in. Are you aware that one of the national awards that New Hampshire received was because it has the flexibility at the local level to implement standards?
Yes.
Thank you. And Mary Hubbard is going to speak in favor.
Good morning. My name is Mary Hubbard. I reside in Dover. I'm here as a citizen, and I support the legislation. I thank the individuals for bringing it forward. I listened to the comments of the New Hampshire School Board Association chairperson using words like rigorous and college and career ready and ready for the workforce, and they're good talking points, but they don't really reflect the reality that we're seeing in our communities. I do not have children. I do not have any children in the school system. My husband and I attended a school board meeting back in January, I believe, of 2013, where some children were sort of trotted up to the front of the meeting room, and they wanted to show off their new math skills. And it was a simple fraction that they were trying to find the answer to. And we sat in just sort of disbelief as to how these kids solved a simple fractional problem. It was creating a grid and drawing things, circles around certain numbers and groups of tens, and it was this very convoluted way of coming to the answer. And we thought, well, hopefully this isn't going anywhere. And we come to find out that this is the new Common Core math. And one of the school board members, Doris Grady, had asked, well, are you teaching the way we all learned, the algorithm? And the presenter, the teacher, said, well, we're doing that, but we're also doing Common Core, so we're going to be teaching both. But what we come to find out is that the testing is on Common Core solely. And so what we are finding is that the children, when they are going home with these math problems and asking their parents for help, as we all grew up asking our parents for help, the parents cannot help them with the work. And so what does this do? This creates the beginning of a wedge between children and their parents. And what happens is, as the children come home, Mom, can you help me with my homework? Sure, honey, what do you have? Look at it. I don't even understand the question. I can't help you. Well, let me show you how we did it. And the parent starts to tell the child how they learned. And the child says, no, no, no. We're not allowed to do it that way. We can't do it that way. We're going to be graded this other way. And so what does that do? That starts the rift between the parent and the child. All of a sudden, now the child is, Mom and Dad are stupid. They can't help me with my homework anymore. I'm not going to ask them anymore. And then you have the breakdown of the family. Who do the kids spend most of the time with during the day? It's the teachers, it's not the parents. I know that parents have huge concerns about the information that their children are being presented with and how they are being asked to solve these problems, certainly in math. And when the kids come home, they are basically trying to undo everything that they've been taught in school. And now you've got the kids conflicted about who they should trust, where their loyalties are. In Dover, for the longest time, the administrators would not even admit that they were teaching Common Core. we would get up and speak about it and indicate our concerns and how bad it was and how it's undermining our American way of life. It's very subversive, and they would not even admit that they were teaching it. They finally did come out and admit that they are teaching it, and now it's full steam ahead. And I heard discussion earlier that supposedly you can opt out. Well, somebody should tell the people in Dover, because they are of the impression that because they took the money, they have to implement this. At a recent curriculum meeting, one of the administrators was saying, finally, after a year of drilling this information into the kids' heads, just drilling it in, the kids seemed finally to be responding. I was horrified that they would categorize it that way and think that that's okay. They are changing children's brains by how they are instituting this, and it's just wrong. I know that some of the teachers are very opposed to this, and yet they refuse to say anything publicly. Their salaries are tied to the results of Common Core. They are in a position of having to choose between getting paid and teaching the children, and many of them are opting to get paid instead of doing their jobs as teaching the children, and they will not come out and say this. The other thing that's a problem with Common Core is that it is a collaboration of big government and big business. The textbook companies, the software companies are making big money on this. I've read studies where children are not able to pass the test, and every time you take a test you have to pay money. And so the test makers are making out big time because the kids cannot pass the tests. They are being taught in a way that is not natural, it is not correct. I applaud the Winnicott School District for doing the due diligence and going around and asking their citizens what they want, because Common Core is wrong. A lot of parents do not come out publicly to say that they don't want Common Core because they are afraid of the retribution that their students will receive in school by the teachers and by the administrators, and they are intimidated themselves. And it's wrong. This legislation is a start. It certainly doesn't go far enough, and I believe Common Core should be eradicated from schools across this country and certainly in New Hampshire. And so I support your efforts, and I would ask that this board support the legislation and bring it to a full vote on the House floor. A lot of people are afraid to speak to you. They're afraid to put their necks out there because there are consequences, but the consequences that our children are suffering are much greater than any inconvenience or any uncomfort we may feel testifying before you. And they are the future of our country. And they deserve every opportunity to learn and grow and to be supported and not be, as the future speaker said, simply capital. Thank you.
Questions?
Well, I just quickly welcome my constituent,
Hello?
and thank you so much for being here to testify. It's an important function that we are here to your citizens, and so thank you.
You're welcome. Did you have a question?
I just wanted to say thank you to you,
You're
and
welcome.
as you're my constituent.
Thank you.
Thank you. And speaking unopposed is Jennifer Manning.
Hello. My name is Jennifer Manning. I've been a New Hampshire educator for 13 years, and I am a kindergarten teacher in the Sanborn Regional School District, and I have the unique opportunity. I started kindergarten in Sanborn, so when it was passed through the voters, I have been in that same classroom with the program. I've watched it grow over the past 10 years. And with the addition of Common Core to our district, my experience has been so positive. And when I hear you speak and I'm listening to everyone, the critical thinking, the problem solving, the rigorous standards that it has added to my teaching with some of our smallest, our youngest little minds in our schools has been incredible. I feel like what I'm teaching hasn't really changed. I don't teach anything different. There's nothing that has come in and I've had to take away everything that I ever taught over the 5 years, since we've been in this process for about 5 years. My teaching is richer. And if you came into my classroom, for example, and you asked my students why they count, they would tell you. So they're not just in a grill and drill. Count, 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 count. Come on, you might get to 100. It's not like that. It really is, why do we count? And it adds function to their skills. there's a meaningful application to what they are doing. And through the work that I've done in Sanborn, I feel that I've added such a great piece to the process of learning for my students. It's definitely given us a streamline and a focus in what we teach. And instead of having this collection of what we're teaching, if you refer to a standard, I can pull out one sheet of paper, front and back, and I can go through the standards. And once you work with them, they just become part of what you're doing. And I'm not going to deny, when I sat down the first time and I read the standards, I was taken aback. Decomposing numbers, I thought, I really didn't teach that before. I taught adding and taught my kids how to add two numbers, but Common Core helped me to realize that decomposing numbers was a kind of a gateway for my students into adding and subtracting, which is later in the year. But I did say I don't think the students can do this, but through my best work with best practices and knowing what works for my students and coming to understand the developmental practices that could support them to reach that. And that wasn't given to me by Common Core. Common Core has not told me how to teach. It has only given me a standard that I should follow to help my students reach these high standards. And I'm also a parent. My son is in kindergarten this year, and his school district is not in the same place that I am in Sanborn. And I sometimes feel like he's missing out on a little bit of opportunity of becoming, or not becoming, but in a richer learning experience and really understanding and adding meaning to what the students are learning. Through the work that Sanborn has done, the competencies, we worked really hard to make benchmarks for our students. So throughout the year, we're looking for them to reach different benchmarks so that they can become competent with this material. I'm encouraged by many things that are in Common Core. In the kindergarten standards, it says with prompting and support. So we're supporting our learners at their developmental level. And from there, I know that if I teach nonfiction in kindergarten, I know they're going to second grade or first grade and they're doing more work in nonfiction. And fourth and fifth, they're going through the years with this consistency that you could pull a string through. You know, narrative writing. 10 years ago, we wrote fairy tales. And I don't take that away from my students. We still do creative writing and we still read fairy tales and fantasy, but we add this rich piece. If you came in last spring, my students wrote opinion pieces on what school rules they thought were important. And I never taught like that before. But to see my students use this knowledge and be contributing to our school community in that way was just, it's very encouraging. And I feel that Common Core has given that to my process. It's made me a better teacher, that I have a streamlined and focused approach to what I'm teaching these students. And I know my colleagues in my building and in the other, we're a regional district, so we have 2 elementary schools. So when I sit and work with them, we will not deny that Common Core is hard work. But it gives our kids this rich experience, and it really has streamlined what we're teaching. And the parents, yes, I think they have questions, but I agree that there's a lot of miscommunication and misleading information that's out there. Because when I first came into Common Core, I wasn't in any of that. All I knew was these were a set of standards, and I was going to read them, and I was going to decompose them, and I was going to learn them. And I did that, and I feel that it's really been a great process. And I know that there are a lot of hard questions out there, but I think when you see the kids, if you came in and you saw what was happening in our classrooms, you feel encouraged by the process that's been happening. To see even the youngest learner be able to use what they've learned through these standards and show a meaningful application of their knowledge. They're problem solvers, they're critical thinkers, they have a deeper level of understanding. Thank you.
Yes, you mentioned that there's misinformation out there. The bill is prohibiting the state from requiring implementation of the Common Core standard. From what I understand, there's people for it and for against it, but most people don't realize that they can opt out of it. Is there a problem with just making that language clear, that towns have the right to opt out? Is there a problem with making that language clear?
I think that opting out would take away from some students' experience. I don't see Common Core hurting my students. It didn't hurt my program. It didn't hurt what curriculum I had created. It made it richer. So then if you give someone an option to opt out, because I do see it right now. I see what I teach every day, and I see what my son comes home with. And I think, wow, he's practicing counting, but he wouldn't be able to tell you why he's counting if I hadn't talked to him and I hadn't enriched him. So what about that student that doesn't have that opportunity, that their parent is able to enrich them? And then I think when you say that, I think the other piece is Common Core doesn't tell you how to teach it. That's the educators and the district's choice of what programs or what pieces of curriculum they're using to implement these standards. This has really been teacher driven. So I can take the standard, and yes, there are programs that I may use to support my teaching, but I am a practicing educator, and I work to find what works best for my students. So I understand what you're saying, but I think that Common Core it's not out there to hurt anyone. It's not out there to not give kids the opportunity because of what resources they may have. If someone's coming home and not having that, or if it's not made to hurt them, and it doesn't tell you how you have to teach, it's merely a set of standards, and the how it's being taught is coming from a different area. It's coming from a different
Just to be clear.
program, excuse me.
Just to be clear, so basically, obviously you're for it, but all we're trying to do in this language is to clarify that people have the right to choose. And what you're saying is we don't need that clarification for the right to choose just because it's a good program. And I understand you're for it, but am I understanding you correctly then?
I think that there doesn't have to be a choice in this. I think that it can. Why shouldn't the students in New Hampshire all have this rich learning experience that Common Core has given? Again, it's a set of standards that is going to align teaching. So if I work in Newton and my son goes to school in another school district, I know that he's getting the same education that I'm teaching every day. And right now, I know that that's not happening because they are not in full implementation of the Common Core standards. They're at a level of it, but they're not there. So I know he doesn't have that same experience. And if I could, I would want my son to come with me and have my colleagues as teachers because we are in full implementation and I can see the difference in that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glenn will like to speak in favor. Well, I'm going to ask you to summarize whatever you have, and we'll be happy to take your written comments.
No, these are just notes that I put.
Okay.
I'm Glenn Willett, and I live in Manchester, New Hampshire. I own QC News Media Services, which is a internet radio TV network across 123 countries. So that means I need employees that speak multiple languages. Common Core does not really encourage that in our schools. A lot of our multiple languages that were being taught as electives have been eliminated. So we talk about businesses needing Common Core, yet we take away from other businesses. But what I really want to say today is the database. When the educators, when the state and the feds are telling us, the parents, that by the 5th grade, we will know if your student should be a trash collector or a doctor. That's not democracy. I went through a school system, in a religious school system, that I was told, because I was left-handed, that I was devious. I was told that I did things backwards. I learned how to read in the 6th grade. But you know what's so funny? I always knew how to read. But I was always told by my teachers that I couldn't read, so I didn't. So one day, they took an assessment test, an IQ test, and they found out I had above average IQ. And they said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "You keep telling me that I'm stupid, that I can't do it." So they let me do it my way. And by the end of that year, in the 6th grade, I was leading college level. That's democracy. In October 16, 2013, 160 parents came to the Manchester School Board meeting on Common Core. They were told to go home. We'll do the work. They were not allowed to be part of the process. That's not democracy. We created a Common Core, our school district created a higher standards, supposedly higher standard than Common Core, yet they copied and pasted 88% of the Common Core, and they forgot to make standards for grades 6, 7, and 8. And to this day, our standards do not include junior high school. What's wrong with that picture? No child left behind. When the state tells you, or the feds tell you that you have to sign this waiver, and you can only have the money if you do that, if they're going to do away with no child left behind to get Common Core, first of all, no child left behind was opening classrooms. It was open classrooms. We still have that in our Beach Street school, which most of our students that are in there are immigrants or refugees. Yet we know today that we have one child in the 5th grade that reads 1st grade level. Somehow that child was left behind with no child left behind. It doesn't work. And Common Core is similar than that because it was created by people who never even taught education. Corporations who will benefit so much money from this. There are 43 states that won't Common Core, but they're not telling me that 22 of those same states are now trying to their legislatures to opt out of Common Core because they've seen now how it works. How many times have we seen a child take a test, assessment through Common Core, and they go home?
Mr. Willett, I'm going to ask you to focus on the contents of Senate Bill 101.
The reason why I favor this...
I see you're very passionate about your feelings about education, but this is not the...
Well, the reason why I favor this bill is because it gives us choice. Somebody just said a while ago that in testimony that parents can't opt out. Our school board will not vote in favor of an opt-out form because they are being told by the state not to do that. We were due money from the state, and for a long time we didn't get it. And we asked, the school board asked, is it because we're not want to follow Common Core? The answer was, could be. Then we were given a letter, the school was given a letter stating that if you don't follow Common Core, you could lose $5.8 million. And the state could lose $50 million because it has to, all school districts have to apply to it. So when they say we can't opt out, and then they tell you you may lose money if you don't, if you do, that's two contradicting statements. So this bill is necessary so that parents can opt out. These kids don't belong to government, they belong to the parents. Thank you.
Thank you. And opposed to the bill, is Dave Judette here? No, he's not. So Dave was opposed. In favor of the bill, we'll hear from Angela Pont.
Hi, my name is Angela Pont. I'm from Portsmouth. I'm a parent. I have children in the public school system. I find it kind of sad that we're here today because we have to actually try to pass legislation to preserve local control. When I learned about Common Core, it was in the fall of 2013. It was adopted in the summer of 2010. So I'm a parent in the public school system. How could I not know?
I was told that there were forums, that there were debates, there were, informational sessions where parents were learning about this, but I hadn't heard about anything, and I read my paper cover to cover every day. So I started investigating. I looked on the New Hampshire government website, and I find an application signed by Governor Lynch and Virginia Berry for the state stabilization funds. They had to provide assurances. One of them was the state longitudinal database, that they would set this up and start collecting student data. The next application I found was Race to the Top, again signed by Governor Lynch and Virginia Berry, giving assurances to the federal government that they would adopt these standards. At the time, the ink probably wasn't even dry. We're going to adopt these standards and align testing. I went to my school board and I presented because I wanted to find out more. I asked the question, a very simple question. Did you vote to adopt the standards in Portsmouth District? And my response, the response that I received was, no, we didn't vote to adopt these standards. Why would we vote to adopt these standards? Superintendent goes to the state adopt the standards, we have to implement them. To me, that doesn't sound like local control. So I hear other people testify about different organizations that support, business organizations and so forth that support it. Some of these organizations are supported by the Gates Foundation, receiving grants, so there's a bit of a conflict of interest potentially there. But as you read the news, you'll find more and more parents across the nation in an uproar about it, but you'll also find teachers' unions. So I know there might be some teachers who are having a good experience with it, but there's a lot of teachers' unions, such as the Chicago, New York, NEA, AFT. They've come out with statements opposing Common Core standards. So to me, local control is dead, and we need the bill. It's sad, but we need the bill because we need to resurrect the concept of local control and give it back to the parents and the teachers, because in the local districts, that's where the innovation will be, and we should start teaching to the child again, not to the standard and not to what some bureaucrat or corporation is telling us to teach to our children. Thank you.
Bill McNally.
I just left the room. He's out in the hall.
Or did you didn't note of opposition?
Yeah, I can clarify, if that's okay. So for the record, my name is Laura Meany. I'm president of the American Federation of Teachers here in New Hampshire. And I didn't put a yes or no on it. And the reason for that is we have 24 locals. Some of them are not teachers, but we have 4 big locals and we have some paraeducators. However, when I go out and I talk to these teachers, they're not concerned. Their concern is the implementation. Do we have the necessary tools to implement Common Core? Have we had the appropriate training to do Common Core? And on my written testimony, there's several statements in there that we need to ensure that this is happening. It's happening in some places, it's not happening in other places. Districts are, I look at Nashua and they're in a different place than Rochester, and Rochester's a different place than Raymond. So, but overall we found, there was a survey done back in 2013 by AFT, and they found that 75% of the teachers do support Common Core. The concern is, for teachers, they're tired. They retired in October. And it seems like every year there's a new fad, there's something new out there. And why I didn't put yes or no is we would just like you to pick something and stick with it and fund us and give us the professional development to go forward. I think we would be having a different conversation if I got up here and I said we don't need standards, because then it will look like, oh, teachers don't want standards, they don't want accountability. Teachers want the standards. Locally, they're working towards them. But just pick something and let us move forward. Don't keep changing it on us. So I hope that clarified.
Thank you.
Thank you. Isn't the training up to the local level too?
The staff development, yes, yeah. And there's some places that do a great job, there's other places that do a horrible job.
Howard.
Yeah, I'm a former school board member from Claremont, New Hampshire, and Claremont has the distinction, actually it's a bad mark, of being the highest tax rate in the state of New Hampshire. And most of that is because of the education budget. Education costs continuously go up year after year, and Common Core will only make those costs go up even higher. And also federal regulations and restrictions on the SAU as well. And also from a constitutional perspective, Common Core is a federal program, just like No Child Left Behind, just like Goals 2000. And being so, it has no business in the state of New Hampshire. It is up to the people of the state of New Hampshire, their elected representatives, to decide in what direction they want education to go, not according to what the federal government wants. Because if you look in your Constitution, under Article 2, Section 2, there is no Department of Education. This was adopted through Congress, through the President of the United States. And for many years, we've had all these programs pushed down onto our local municipalities. And we've been controlled by the federal government, and it only makes things worse in our cities and towns. So to restore the power back to the people, back to the New Hampshire legislature, we need to support this bill wholeheartedly, and keep Common Core out of the state of New Hampshire. I do have some typed remarks of my testimony, and you're welcome to those.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if I have enough for everyone.
Senator
Do you
Stiles.
have any questions?
Senator Stiles has a question.
I have a question. Quite often we're compared to other nations as far as our standards go. And other nations have national standards for students to reach. And in this particular country, where we have national standards and allow our local districts to implement them however they see fit and to add to wherever they feel they need to, what is the issue?
The issue is that everyone should have freedom of choice. That's how the founders set up the government. We're not compared to other countries. We're compared to our own country, our own citizens, whatever works best in each city or town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anne Marie Banfield. No, wasn't here.
I'm bringing water because I'm having coughing, so I have a coughing attack. I'm going to address the amendment also. I don't think that that's really something that's been really brought forth in the committee today, so a lot of my comments will be geared towards that. Mr. Chairman and committee members, for the record, my name is Anne Marie Banfield. I am the Education Liaison for Cornerstone Action, and we represent roughly 6,000 New Hampshire residents. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of SB101, and I do come here in full support.
Testimony anyway.
This is important because many parents and school board members have been under the impression that Common Core standards were a mandate on their school district, and it is unfortunate that administrators were not quick to clarify this misunderstanding, and it remains a problem today. I would just add that while technically there is no mandate on the schools, the Smarter Balanced Assessment does put pressure on schools to comply with the adopted Common Core standards. So in essence, while there is no mandate, if you're going to use a Common Core test, you're pretty much forcing schools to use them. The amendment. It also clarifies further and defines competencies that are now part of the rules passed last year by the New Hampshire Board of Education. Competency-based education is not new or innovative in any way. It's actually based on the outcome-based education that has been tried over the past few decades. Competency-based education, or outcome-based education, OBE, is part of the redesigning of public education promoted by the U.S. Department of Education. And I do have a link to their press release. With a mandate that schools use outcome-based education, we can already see numerous problems that have erupted in our own public schools. From the ill-defined goals, subjective grading, and report cards to which parents have already objected in New Hampshire,
OBE is proving again to be another reform effort that misses an opportunity to focus education on literacy. One might assume that competencies means academic goals. However, that is not the case. These outcomes are often referred to as soft skills, workforce skills, or 21st century skills. But what does that mean in terms of improving literacy? Not much. Back in 2013, I wrote an article in the Bedford Patch highlighting the numerous problems with outcome-based education, now called competency-based education in New Hampshire. I included comments from Dr. W. Stephen Wilson, a math professor from Johns Hopkins University, who looked over the Algebra 1 competencies as listed on the New Hampshire Department of Education's website and as implemented in some of our local schools. I personally reached out to him and asked him to look at the competencies that were listed on the website. He used phrases like, the curriculum outline is weak when referring to the Algebra 1 competencies in Rochester. He is highly critical of the Algebra 1 competencies used in Litchfield, since they are based on what he considers a flawed textbook. And finally, on the New Hampshire Department of Education's own website, they put up Algebra 1 competencies. This is what he had to say. It is quite interesting, and it is quite an interesting document full of compromises. There is some real content mixed with blather. The competencies and process skills are so general and vague, they are meaningless. A reasonable person would just ignore them because of that. An unreasonable person, however, might not. Then when it comes to content, you have great things like add, subtract, multiply, divide, polynomial, and rational expressions, and determine solutions in quadratic equations. There is real content. On the other hand, even in the content section, there is incoherence of the sort. Generalizes, and this is what's on the website, generalizes a nonlinear relationship using words or symbols, or generalizing a common nonlinear relationship to a specific case. He goes on to say, how you generalize to a specific is beyond me. I always thought you generalized from a specific. This is just nonsense. These are the Algebra 1 competencies on the New Hampshire Department of Education's website. The point is that I've seen worse. The two good things I quote above are really good and unusual for their clarity and specificity. This is balanced out by utter nonsense that is all over the place. I wouldn't want to buy this, but I don't believe in standards for competencies and process. That is a math professor out at Johns Hopkins. He's also part of the Fordham team that analyzes Common Core standards. Parents again are being misled into believing that if a student is competent or meets an outcome in a core academic class, their child has mastered the academic content. Nothing could be further than the truth. As we continue to see students pass their competencies and yet are unable to score proficient on standardized tests, it would be a good time to look back at this experiment and ask if this is helping students become literate in the subject material. SB101 helps to narrow the definition of competencies and focuses the outcomes on academics. While I believe it is better to abandon competency-based education in New Hampshire, as other states have already done due to the poor performance of outcome-based education, this is still a step in the right direction. Competencies also focus on soft skills that are not based on academic content at all. This shifts the focus of a core content teacher away from the core subject to soft skills. This all comes at the expense of academic excellence and literacy. If an algebra teacher has to make sure their students are collaborating and working as a team, there is less focus on making sure those students are learning the actual academic content. I've heard enough complaints from parents who are not happy that their children are wasting time on projects and slowing down the learning process to understand that this mandate is coming at the expense of literacy. By placing focus back on academics, this legislation will give teachers the freedom they need to focus attention where it is needed. In class where soft skills like collaboration and teamwork might be important, that teacher certainly has the freedom to do that with their students. For these reasons, I do support SB 101. That is my written testimony. I do have a copy of the Patch article that I wrote on competency-based education. That is my written testimony. I do have a couple of points I wanted to make based on the testimony that was given. we heard a lot about the math, that we need to improve math education. I'm wondering if everybody has seen the report that came out recently by Professor Milgram, who sat on the validation committee, and he issued he drafted a report that shows all of the flaws and all the missing concepts of the Common Core math standards. Because I'd be happy to send this to you if you have not seen them.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
People have signed, I have Bonnie Dunham and Mark Joyce who are opposed, and then in favor were Representative Murataki, Representative Notter, Senator Booten, Senator Daniels, Representative Rice, Richard Lawrence, Representative Ferreira, Angela Courier here.
Yes. Well, I'm a parent of 3 children, 2 who have autism, and that's partly the reason why I'm here today. And to me, this is not about whether or not I like Common Core or not like Common Core. It's simply about a matter of choice. And I feel that choice is very important because I have been told in my school district that my child who is significantly impacted by autism, who can't sit at a computer for long periods of time, doesn't have the ability to, and the only alternative for her to take the testing is teach to talk. Well, that's not even effective for my child who has autism. And I was told that I cannot opt her out of Common Core standards, which I keep hearing. There's conflict. Well, there's also conflict in whether or not how Common Core came into being in the state of New Hampshire. To me, it went around the Constitution of New Hampshire. It went through the back door, through unelected officials, through coercion, through No Child Left Behind, and money from the state and from the federal government. Me as a parent, and I know many teachers who don't like it and who won't say anything to their superiors, but encourage me to keep speaking against it because it makes it difficult for them to teach the things that they want to teach and that are developmentally appropriate. So
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So what happens to your child when the test time comes up?
Well, she'll have to sit there for however long they're taking the test and sit there and look at this computer. And I can guarantee you she's going to have inappropriate behavior. She's going to start screaming, throwing, doing things. So she's going to have to be taken away from this testing. So why should I even put my child who has autism even through that, or the teachers that are supporting her? And so if she can't take it then, they're going to keep taking, she's going to keep having to try to take this test until she can complete it, which she'll never be able to pass it because she's not at her age level.
So there's no other option open?
No, and they said for kids with developmental disabilities or with IEPs, there is, I'm like, well, what's the alternative to the test? They're like, there is none. But I'm like, what? So why can't I in her IEP opt her out of this, a test that I know she's not going to be able to take? And they said, well, we're required to give every child the test. So as a parent, it didn't seem like on a state level that parents, teachers, and business people can come together and have a voice on whether or not these standards were implemented, because under the New Hampshire Constitution, they're supposed to be, if there's a significant change in curriculum, there needs to be public input and there needs to be a vote on it. And from my understanding and from what I'm getting, and I'm trying to educate myself as best I can, none of that was happening. It was by unelected officials. So what I'm hoping that happens here today is that so I'm in support of this bill in order to give, if we're not going to do it on a state level, then let's do it on a community level. Let's do it in our school districts, in our communities. Let the parents finally stand up, have a voice. Let the teachers who have to implement this one-size-fits-all curriculum, let them have their voice, whether or not they're for it or against it, and business people. But let's do it on the local level so that there can be a forum, because I know there's a lot of parents who are against it. There's a lot of teachers who are against it. And you know what? And I heard people here saying that they like it, they want to keep it in those school districts. Great for you. If you want to do that, let you have that choice, but for those who don't want it, let us also have our choice of being able to go a different route than Common Core.
Senator Stiles?
I have a question. If there's someone from the department, I'd just like clarification on whether or not she has an opportunity for her student to opt out or have different arrangements.
Speak right from there if you like.
Okay, great, thank you. My name is Heather Gage from the Department of Education, and I would love, maybe we can talk afterwards to find out your school district. There is another option. We have the statewide assessment, the traditional assessment. Right now, we're moving forward with a smarter balance. That's in ELA and mathematics. Then there's also what we call an alternate assessment. In the past, you may have heard it called the New Hampshire Alternate Learning Progressions Assessment. That assessment is for students that have severe cognitive disabilities of the like. And so the IEP team at the school, which includes the parent, makes the determination on which assessment that child would participate in. And then there are also other opportunities that we can talk about afterwards, but they're for students who may not be able to sit for the traditional assessment, there are other opportunities.
Well, yeah, if I can bring that information back, that'd be great, because at this point, they're like, we don't even know what to do with our developmental disability population. So.
Sure, and we have many resources that can help your school out.
Okay, thank you. And that adjourns the hearing. Thank you.
Excuse me, point of order, I signed up. I'm not going to get a chance to speak. There's a seat on that table that I signed up for.
You did not indicate that you wish to speak.
Wasn't that sheet of paper for?
I have it. You didn't indicate that you wish to speak.
I see it, because I took a half a day off of work to come up here.
David, you didn't indicate that you wish to speak.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick question. First time I've ever been here.
Yes.
My name is John Liscars from Hooksett. I'm an elected school board member. I did have a statement. I didn't know what the policies were.
Yeah, we'll take it.
Can I take it? Give it to you? Great, thank you. Who do I?
Just hand it right to the court.
I may be wrong.
No, but you're right.
This one, you know.
Let me So I won't let you straw, but yeah.
Minor technicality.
I object. So much for local control. Yeah. I mean, the intention was to come here and speak. Now we know what's going to happen. Thank you. No, they're going your local control.